All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Good to see everybody this morning. I'm Chase Bernard. I'm the GIS manager for the town of Chapel Hill, and rather than me talk too much, we're going to get to the actual content of the presentation. So I'll just bring up, most people know Kent Rothrock. Take it away.
Thanks, Chase. Good morning. Hope everybody's doing well. Kent Rothrock with Avenion. I'm the Director of Technical Services. This morning, we're going to talk about a very common problem that we deal with my firm, and that is preparing for ESRI upgrades and migrations. And I will jump right in. As usual, I have way too many slides for a 20-minute presentation, so I will move quickly. But hopefully we'll have time for a couple questions at the end. The outline will talk about the nature of the problem. One of the big issues you got to deal with, software compatibility, huge issue. You don't get that right, you're not going to have a very successful upgrade. Hardware issues, upgrades versus migrations, software licensing. Of course, that's changing these days. Other considerations and some recommendations. So again, I'm part of Avenion now. A lot of you guys remember me as Highland Mapping back in the day. Avenion is a global company with over 900 employees worldwide. I am out of the Metro Banner Elk office. So, statement of the problem, and again, I know you guys are dealing with this all the time, but software is constantly being refined. We're constantly chasing software. We've been doing it for the last 25 years. I suppose we're going to keep doing it. So we're always looking for new functionality. We're looking for better security a lot of times, especially with the server side things. A couple of prime examples that we're all living right now is the move from ArcGIS Desktop to Pro, as well as the move from ArcGIS Server to Enterprise. So those are sort of the two massive trends, in my opinion. Again, nowadays you don't want to get too far behind. There was a time when you could sit on 10.3 for 7 years and then go to 10.8. It's a little trickier now, both with Enterprise and with Pro. You want to stay a little more current, so you're going to need to stay on top of this. The days of waiting 5 years between upgrades is probably over. Obviously, unsupported software is not a good thing. We're still feverishly working to get people off of ArcMap or desktop onto ArcGIS Pro. And then it can be a security risk, especially on the server side when you stop having updates and patches, which is what happens ultimately. And again, nowadays making a large jump can be a lot trickier, especially with ArcGIS Enterprise. So again, the days of going 10.3 to 10.8, no big deal. You don't want to try to go from 10.6 to 11.5, you know, so you gotta do some incremental upgrades in between. So again, when do you upgrade? When do we figure it out? So a lot of it is hardware and software life cycles. I know that's hard to see, but it's basically surmising that we all know March 1st, 2026, ArcGIS Desktop is formally retired. So no more patches, no more support. And so again, there's a new philosophy needed. We've got to keep ahead of the curve now. Waiting too long is going to ultimately lead to compatibility bottlenecks. So you want to find the least inconvenient time. There's never a perfect time to upgrade or migrate in local government. There's just not. So you've got to try to figure out least inconvenient time. Based on when you can do it is based on many factors. Obviously, staff availability. You want the key people around. Vendor availability a lot of times. If you've got third-party implementations that require a vendor to help you make sure it all works correctly, you need to make sure they're going to be around. Procurement schedules is a big one. Don't want to wait too long for funding. I had a situation a couple years ago where somebody had budgeted for a big upgrade and we helped them do it, but they had, and part of this was my fault, I think. I have to take a little responsibility. They had neglected to prepare on the SQL side, so they didn't buy a new SQL version. They were stuck at 2012, so as a result, we could only go to 10.7. They ended up buying SQL 2019. We came back and took them up to 10.8 or 10.9. But that one thing held us back, and buying SQL Server can be several $1,000s. They didn't have in their budget, we got held back. So you got to keep ahead of those things. Again, compatibility issues between GIS and third parties is another big one. before you upgrade, if you've got a lot of these hardcore integrations, you need to make sure that the version you're going to is certified with the third-party vendor. It's a good idea. And again, certification, sometimes stuff works even if it's not certified, but I think it's a great idea to try to be on supported implementations. So again, some more little graphics here. I know they're hard to see from the back. They're hard to see on my screen. But this is just showing like Windows Server lifecycle and SQL Server lifecycle. So again, a lot of the driving factors of the last few years has been the retirement of Windows Server 2012 as well as SQL Server 2012. Those were really great, stable versions that people were on for a decade, but they've aged out. And so, got to move forward. So what versions to go to? Again, there's no right answer for any of this stuff. Numerous factors. You got to look at the ArcGIS Pro life cycle, the Enterprise life cycle. Again, I talked about this at a little thing we did last night, but at this point in time, odd releases are supported for 6 years. Even releases are supported for 3 years. I can't explain why that is, but I can tell you that like 11.1 will be supported longer than 11.2. So I'm telling my clients when they ask me, hey Kent, what version should we go to? 11.1 or 11.3. So that's just my recommendation and where I'm coming from. I'm going to stay on the longer supported version. Other factors, software compatibility again. What versions do we have? What version can we go to? Third-party integrations, a lot of times one of those third-party things will hold you back. So just be prepared for that. And there are workarounds potentially. And then of course budgetary needs. So again, this is just the graphic that shows the enterprise life cycle and those dates. I know it's impossible to read at that scale. So again, software compatibility, huge. You got to get this right. Enterprise only works with certain versions of ArcGIS Enterprise only work with certain versions of Windows Server. Likewise, Enterprise only works with specific versions of RDBMSs. I mainly work with SQL Server, so that's the one I mainly talk about. ArcGIS Pro will only work with certain versions of SQL or RDBMSs as well. And ArcGIS Pro only works on specific versions of Windows. And then again, third-party apps may not be certified with specific ESRI versions. So you got to check that and lean into your third-party vendor to get with the program. So again, not going to spend a lot of time on these slides, but these are just slides showing where enterprise requires specific version of server. So this particular version, 11.3, will work with 2016 and later. So if you've got Windows Server 2012, you do not want to plan to go to ArcGIS Enterprise 11.3. Likewise, Enterprise and Pro here work with specific versions of SQL. So at 11.3, which aligns with ArcGIS Pro 3.3, and when you look at the ESRI system requirements pages, you'll see how it lines up versions of Enterprise and Pro together, and it's probably a good idea to try to stay aligned. But Enterprise 11.3 and Pro 3.3 is really only designed to work with SQL Server 17 or later. So if you've got SQL Server 2016, you're going to need to upgrade it to a newer version prior to upgrading to 11.3. And again, same thing with Pro. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but certain versions of Windows. I think most people are off of Windows 7 and even Windows 10 now. I know I'm on 11. So hardware issues, not going to delve too deeply into that, but do your homework. Assume you need a lot of resources. Virtual environments work great. Again, review the ESRI requirements pages. They generally give you all the detail you need. Determining the number of servers is really tricky, and again, if you're not sure, get with a vendor. We can help you do that, but the general, depending on your size, the general rule of thumb is for enterprise, you want a server per component. So ArcGIS Portal, ArcGIS Server, data store, 2 web adapters. You can co-locate the data store on ArcGIS Server on the portal machine. You can co-locate the web adapters because they're not really resource hogs, but you got to think about this and design accordingly. Other server roles, such as image server and GeoEvent, you're going to need another server. And even today, if you do the utility network, ESRI is generally recommending another server to house all those services as well. And there's many, many, many different configurations and architectures you can do. If you get into load balancing or failover, it requires a lot more servers too. So it can be a dizzying number of servers if you have a fully baked out, fully redundant system. Also, if you do a dev environment, you're going to need more servers. I did just want to mention cloud's a great solution, especially with enterprise, because once you get into branch versioning and doing everything through feature services, you can basically put your entire enterprise in a cloud environment, even if your desktops are still on-prem. So there's lots of details, lots of potential there. Again, key metrics, no rocket science here. RAM, keep throwing RAM at it. It's cheap now. When I was younger, RAM was very expensive. Now it's, you know, pennies on the dollar. Don't skimp on processors. That can affect your licensing cost if you don't have EA. Most ESRI stuff is licensed for 4 cores by default. So keep an eye on that. That platform's probably changing as well. With PCs, RAM. Pro needs lots of RAM. Pro is designed to work with 3D, which you younger folks are going to really be living in that world in the years to come. So it needs a lot of RAM and really robust memory cards. So again, just some little fun graphics. I'm not very artistic. I do my own slides, so I'll take whatever heckling you want to give me. But so this is a super simple ArcGIS server, sort of old school deployment, where the web adapter and ArcGIS server and IIS are all co-located on one machine. Your database stuff is on another machine. This is your typical common multi-machine enterprise where we've got ArcGIS server, portal, and data store all behind the firewall with the RDBMS. On the other side, in the DMZ or outside the firewall, we have IIS and 2 web adapters co-located. And it just goes up from there. This is a scenario where we have 2 servers that are mimicked as one ArcGIS server instance. And basically what that is failover. So if one of those servers goes down, the other server is basically a mirror image. But the trick with that is you have to move the config store to another server. That's, you know, hopefully not going to go down at the same time. And then it just goes up from there. Again, I got a million of these diagrams, but this is a full failover where you've got 2 sets of every server. So if one set goes down for some reason, the other set keeps running. Upgrades versus migration. So when to do what? Again, tricky question, loaded question. Upgrades are always easier and faster. Anytime you're going to do a migration, plan on more time, plan on more potential disruption, plan on more risks. Operating system upgrades are often affect this. So we'll work with clients and, okay, it's time to upgrade. And we always leave it up to their IT department whether or not they want to spin up new servers or do operating system upgrades. So if you're willing to take Windows Server 2012 up to Windows Server 22 in place, I'm cool with it. We generally leave that up to IT people, and generally nowadays they want to spin up new servers. So a lot of times it means a migration. A lot more work, a lot more risk. If you're migrating, like with us, we usually build lots of automation on the relational database machine. Moving the SQL box to another machine is the hardest part of the work because in some counties we have 50 automated jobs that we have to move. We have to move all those scripts and make sure everything works. And that can get tricky too, whether or not a big thing to think about, and I won't go into any detail because of time, but a big thing to think about is when you move your database server, do you rename it or not? Because you can do it either way. If I need to move it, I know if I rename it, all my pro projects are going to break, right? You can actually stage it, and then when you do the live cutover, end up with a new server having the same name as the old server. But a little tricky, you know, come by my booth and ask if you have any questions about that. Wanted to just talk briefly about licensing. Again, this platform's changing. Concurrent use licenses are basically dead after March 1st. It stinks. Most of us actually like concurrent licenses, but it's the way of the world. Named user is the new way we're all going. So you're going to have a named user account tied to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. And then single use is still a thing. I actually asked ESRI this morning because I couldn't find any documentation on that, but it's a little different take. So most of us are going to named users whether we like it or not. And that's okay, it works, but just you got to plan for that. Software licensing, again, for those of you that haven't got into enterprise yet, server license is essentially the same. It's a provisioning file. That's actually how ESRI monetizes ArcGIS Enterprise, is by the amount of server licenses you have. Because if you really need a giant enterprise, you're going to need additional server licenses. Portal license is a JSON file. It includes all the user types and the server roles, user types and member roles, user type extensions. You can see online for lots of good information. I wanted to point out another concept, the user type extensions. This has recently changed, so up until, I think it's 11.2, people that had the parcel fabric or utility network had to have a specific user type extension. Now they merge those together, and they call it the advanced editing user type extension. So at 11.2, moving forward, if through enterprise you're editing utility network, trace network, a parcel fabric, you're using a topology, you're using attribute rules or any branch versioning, those editors have to have the advanced editing user type extension. So we got burned on that with an upgrade recently. We were unaware, and our client had like 15 users, and they're $800 a piece. So we get halfway through the upgrade, and they had to, unfortunately, go find money, which it worked out. But I thought this is a great thing to point out to people. You need to plan for this. Put it in your budget, talk to your ESRI reps accordingly.
We just had to say that we had 30 users. We had to spend $25,000 out of the blue.
And you didn't know about it?
We didn't know about it.
Yeah.
Got burned.
Yep. Thanks, Steve. All right, a few other considerations. Running Pro on a server, again, the only reason I mention this is we generally do lots of automation with Python scripting, obviously. You got to have the base code on the server if you're going to do that. So we generally load ArcMap on the server, and all our Python scripts are referencing those libraries. We're going to do the same thing with Pro, but Pro doesn't always run very well on a server. So if you try to like open up the dialog and work with maps, it can be real clunky. The Python scripts will work fine. But the reason for that is servers generally don't have good graphics. You know, we don't buy servers with robust GPUs and graphics cards. So when you load Pro, a lot of times it'll act sort of funky, so just be aware of that. You can also, of course, run your automation from another machine if you want a PC, which some of our clients do. Again, third-party apps and integrations, check for certification. It could definitely impact your timeline. Some huge integration you have, they're not certified with 11.3. I wouldn't go till you get there. But again, have a test environment to fully test that stuff first. That's the key. For those of you that haven't made the move to Pro yet, don't be ashamed. There's a lot of people that haven't. You can run ArcMap and Pro on the same PC. The nice part of that is you could be training people. When you go live, you don't have to worry about the end user machines. They've already got Pro on there, so it'll save you a little bit of work. Also, any web services that were initially published through MAP have to be replaced with the ArcGIS Pro runtime. Again, sometimes you can have a little funky behavior there, so you want to be able to test if possible, anticipate, assume you're going to have problems. That's one thing I would always say, and be pleasantly surprised when you don't, but do your homework. Annotation, if you're still editing annotation, once you go to Pro, if you're going to edit it, it has to be upgraded. And once it's upgraded, you can't even use it in desktop anymore. So that's something you definitely have to plan for. You know, try to retire annotation where possible. And excuse me, I know it's not always possible, but that's another thing that can get you. Again, finally, some recommendations. Create and maintain a detailed system inventory. I know this is hard because we're all reacting and our GISs have all grown out of control and become this monster now. But understand what, if you can keep a spreadsheet of all your hardware, software, databases, web apps, services, end users, integrations, and any other account info, usernames, passwords. A lot of that stuff you forget about, like service account passwords, till you do an upgrade or a migration, and it's like, oh crap, who's got the SA password? So keep up with that stuff. I always put that on my clients to keep up with. Again, if possible, maintain a dev or test environment for testing upgrades. Ideally, and lots of people go cheap on the dev environments because, you know, hey, we'll just have a single machine enterprise. If you really want to test apples to apples, whatever your prod looks like, your development environment needs to look like. Again, can involve a lot of servers, can cost a lot of money. Look into the cloud as an option. We discovered early on, even before I got acquired by Vinian, cloud is the way to have test servers. It's so easy, and you can turn them on and off. So explore that. Also, just a few more wrap-up points here. Plan carefully to minimize risk and downtime. Document every step. So we typically, when we're doing migrations, we'll do a complete dry run, and we document it all. So the day we go live, you know, our goal with our clients is minimize downtime, get the upgrade done as soon as possible. So we document every single step, so we're not having to remember or guess when we're doing it again. Back up everything, however you can back it up. Get familiar with the WebGIS DR tool. That's for backing up the various components of enterprise. Make your IT do server snapshots, backup databases, whatever. Again, do a dry run. And communicate with end users to control expectation and the public reaction. So post messages on your web apps. Your web app may be clunky for a couple of days while you're figuring out locator services and things like that, especially if you're doing a big jump. Prepare your end users. It's probably going to be a little rocky for a day or two. Just plan for that. Alrighty, any questions? Again, sorry to go so fast. I did a 4-hour workshop on this a couple years ago. Yes, sir.
You were referencing earlier, like 4th slide back, about republishing ArcMap services through Pro when you upgrade your service. How does that impact ArcMap published geoprocessing scripts? Do you need to also take those that were published through ArcMap and redesign them through ArcPro to publish them effectively?
I would.
Okay.
Yes, I would definitely do that. In some cases, that stuff will work. It's just like we help a lot of people migrate their ArcMap Python scripts to ArcPro Python scripts. A lot of times, you don't actually have to do anything. You just point the automation to look at the Pro executable instead of the ArcMap or the Python executable that comes with ArcMap. But I would assume you need to redo it in Pro. I would make that assumption. Or I would at least, again, have a robust testing environment to see if the old stuff works first. It might. So, but I would plan on doing it through Pro. Anything else? Anybody else?
In the upgrade process, what do you do if you have to change the URL? Do you try to keep the same one, or you just set aside a whole new one? Like if you go from, like if you have gis.domain.com, do you try to keep that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Put it this way, there is no easy button for that right now. That is a nightmare scenario. We've run into it a couple of times. And again, it's going to happen. People are going to say, hey, our IT, we're going from .gov to .com. And now it's a lot of work. There is no easy way to do that. I can tell you, we've done it, but it's almost easier to stand up another portal and migrate your content with distributed collaboration or some methodology like that. It's very difficult. I'm hoping that one day our friends at ESRI will put a utility in there that can find all those URLs and change them because they're just baked into all that architecture. And it's in all those Postgres black box databases in the background. But right now, that's definitely something that's hard. There's no easy way.
I've done these a bunch. In the event that there's an issue with an upgrade, and to keep it simple, maybe just like a in-place upgrade from say 10.9.1 to 11.1, not a big jump. And there's an issue. I've always gone back to a server snapshot if I had to,
Well, again, a lot of times we'll use WebGIS DR to help with migration because it packages everything up nice and clean. You're moving it to a new server. That makes sense. In your case where we try to do the upgrade and it goes bad, we generally will just roll back to the server snapshot as well because it's easiest. I know that's a quick and dirty question, but I think there's places for both, and like you said, in a perfect world, WebGIS DR would just work great and roll right back. But we know server snapshots tend to work very well.
And